What country funded the Nazis? In 1946, at the Nuremberg trials, Nazi leaders faced prosecution for the Holocaust. Surprisingly, Switzerland was mentioned. When asked how the Nazi war machine was funded, a key figure revealed a secret. He explained, "Paying in gold was hard. Other countries imposed embargoes. Only in Switzerland could we still do business." Rethinking World War II economically shows Switzerland's crucial financial role. Did Switzerland bankroll the Third Reich? Did the Swiss National Bank buy vast amounts of gold? The archives are well researched, yet this story remains largely unknown. As early as 1943, Britain's Foreign Secretary accused Switzerland directly. He stated, "Every franc of war material sent to Germany prolongs the war. The Third Reich likely wouldn't have survived after 1943 without help." This included the Swiss National Bank handling looted assets. Was Switzerland truly a small, neutral nation? Look at a 1942 map of Europe.
Nazi dominance was vast.
In the center was this tiny island of neutrality, Switzerland. Why isn't Switzerland's role more commonly known? Did they use their economy to maintain peace? Did they really serve as Nazi Germany's banker? Hitler rose to power amid a broken economy. Treaty of Versailles reparations and the 1929 crisis crippled Germany. Germany's situation in 1933 was desperate. They'd left the gold standard and faced strict exchange controls. Unemployment was rampant, affecting millions. So Hitler's priorities from 1933 were clear. First, restart the German economy. Second, and more strategically, rearm. Both faced a major obstacle: a shortage of foreign exchange. As industry revived, it needed imported raw materials. These had to be paid for with foreign currency. Germany lacked resources beyond coal. Imports were vital for their immense armament effort. Rearmament drained the Reichsbank's gold and foreign reserves. Germany was a financially vulnerable economy. They anxiously sought gold for crucial imports. The 1938 annexation of Austria provided a temporary boost. This added Austria's billion in gold and foreign currency. But the strain of importing materials took its toll. This was evident in events like Kristallnacht in November 1938. Nearly 100 Jews were murdered, thousands deported, synagogues burned. This event showed the regime's ruthlessness. Just 3 days later, a meeting discussed the financial cost. The cost of replacing broken Belgian plate glass. After Hitler's rise, Hjalmar Schacht aimed for economic self-sufficiency. Programs for synthetic materials were implemented. Yet, raw material imports deepened the deficit. By 1939, seized assets from Austria were depleted within months. Germany faced an unsustainable financial situation again. Schacht notified Hitler in a stark memorandum. The memo stated, "We're bankrupt and about to default." The Reichsbank was on the verge of collapse. A radical policy change was needed. The Reichsbank lobbied Hitler regarding finance. Economic necessity pressured the regime to change direction. Hitler's response was decisive. Schacht was retired. World War II can be seen as a simple plundering campaign. Hitler launched the Blitzkrieg or Lightning War. This was the only viable strategy for acquiring resources. In 1939, German forces had limited ammunition. As Germany invaded the Netherlands and Belgium, central banks were targets. German experts searched for precious metals and assets. These were seized to fund much-needed raw materials. Nazi Germany seized vast amounts of gold across Europe. They took 83 tons from Austria, 132 tons from the Netherlands. In 1943, they seized 65 tons of Italian and Albanian gold. World War II saw the most organized looting in history. But the gold then needed to be traded for raw materials. Where could the Third Reich exchange it, unseen by the Allies? World War II was also an economic war. The Allies imposed a blockade, limiting German imports. Foreign exchange was strictly controlled, especially with the pound and dollar. Before the war, the Reichsbank held certain gold reserves. After conquest, German gold began appearing in central banks. This raised suspicions immediately. Central bank directors were aware. Jean-Pierre Roth, head of the Swiss National Bank, had to explain their actions. Questions arose about Germany's gold reserves. One approach was to assume shipments stayed within pre-war limits. Questions were asked, but legality wasn't fully analyzed. A major criticism in retrospect: not enough questions were asked. The Third Reich needed raw materials and gold was key to getting them. Where did they trade it? Here are a few options. Choose the one that best fits your tone. Option 1, slightly more intriguing. What the Allies didn't know? World War II was also a fight for money. They tried to cut off. Option 2, more direct and engaging surprise. World War II was also an economic battle. The Allies tried to isolate. Option 3, focus on the revelation. Little did they know. World War II was also an economic struggle. The goal was to isolate. Here are a few options for rewriting the subtitle, keeping the original meaning, tone, and length in mind, with a slightly reduced word count. Option 1, more direct. Right at the start, the Allies put a blockade in place. It really limited what Germany could import. Option 2, slightly more descriptive. Early on, the Allies seized control and set up a strict blockade. This severely cut down on Germany's imports. Option 3, focus on impact. Once they had the power, the Allies launched a blockade. This severely restricted German imports. Option 4, concise and engaging. The Allies quickly imposed a blockade. This really cut off Germany's imports. Here are a few options. Pick the one that best fits the vibe you're going for. Option 1, direct and informative. We're talking essential supplies and strict money rules. Plus, there were major curbs on exchanging currency with Britain. Option 2, slightly more engaging. Think vital goods and super tight currency control. And get this, big restrictions on foreign cash with the British. Option 3, focus on impact. It all came down to crucial resources and a controlled money flow. And they really clamped down on using British pounds. Option 4, concise and punchy. Vital materials met tough currency regulations. Plus, serious limits on British foreign exchange. Let's talk about the British pound and the US dollar. Here's the rewritten subtitle in US English. Looking at the numbers, the Fourth Reichsbank was right there before the war. Here are a few options. Choose the one that best fits the tone of your video. Option 1, slightly more formal but still engaging. This was ultimately approved or taken in by the Swiss National Bank. Option 2, more direct and punchy. The Swiss National Bank accepted or placed this. Option 3, focus on the action. So, the Swiss National Bank took this in or approved it. Here are a few options, playing with slightly different vibes but keeping the core meaning and tone. Option 1, slightly more dramatic. Europe was falling fast. With the vast Germanic tribes sweeping across, claiming over half the continent, imagine the sheer amount of treasure. Option 2, more direct, action-oriented. The Germanic tribes were on the move, conquering a huge chunk of Europe, 2/3 actually. And with that came serious riches. Option 3, focus on the amount of gold. As the Germanic legions pushed their borders, taking over 2/3 of Europe, there was a truly staggering hoard of gold to be found. Soon, these coins with a strange Reichsbank stamp started showing up. That immediately felt super sketchy, and it wasn't long before the truth came out. Germany's got gold reserves that showed up after the war, which is kind of wild, right? This instantly raised eyebrows, a fact every central bank chief was aware of. For 15 years, Jean-Pierre Roth was the top bank chief in Switzerland. As the chairman of the Swiss National Bank, back in the late 90s, this guy had to really get and explain why the National Bank did what it did during the tough times of war. Here's the rewritten subtitle in US English: aiming for a natural, engaging TikTok/YouTube style while retaining the original meaning and reducing length slightly. Original subtitle *, there was question as to what the German gold reserves had been before the war. Rewritten subtitle, Option 1, people wondered about Germany's gold reserves before the war. Rewritten subtitle, Option 2, nobody was sure about Germany's gold stash before the war kicked off. So, one idea was like, as long as the deliveries stayed within a certain amount, but if we'd thought they were just sitting there as the Reichsbank's hidden treasure before the war, that wouldn't have been a big deal. People were questioning it, but no one dug deep enough to check if it was actually legal. Looking back, a big critique was that not nearly enough questions were asked. This was asked, and it was reportedly done in good faith. Essentially, they took their word for it. The bankers at the Swiss National Bank were far from foolish. They were generally known for their extreme caution. However, they never requested any certificates of origin for the gold that had been looted. Alfred Hess, who was the Director General of the Bank of Switzerland, even stated, "We never asked for proof. We found Mr. Pool's word to be entirely sufficient." Emil Pool had been employed by the Reichsbank since the time of the First World War. In the perception of Europe, this director and the vice president of the institution truly represented the German central banks. Official stance and strategy. Representatives from the Reichsbank had already been in communication with the SNB prior to the outbreak of the war. Even today, central bankers share a significant level of trust among themselves. They engage in open communication and readily share vital information. So, it's understandable that some likely thought, why would a Reichsbank representative deceive me now? I trust him. If he assures me that the German gold reserves are sufficient to cover all incoming deliveries, then why shouldn't I believe he's being completely truthful? The vast underground vaults, which span 7 levels within the Swiss Federal Archives, much like the records held by the Swiss National Bank, were meticulously examined by historian Marc Perronin. The official minutes from meetings involving the directors of the Swiss National Bank led the researcher to an astonishing discovery. The most senior officials at the SNB were indeed prepared to employ questionable and deceptive tactics. Throughout the year 1942, Switzerland received intelligence concerning the questionable transactions conducted by the Reichsbank, which drew the attention of Swiss diplomats, as well as the governing board of the SNB. One of the general directors even suggested remelting the gold bars that had been sold by the Reichsbank, in an effort to completely erase any evidence of their true origin. Ultimately, the idea of melting the gold bars that had come from Germany to obscure their origin was put on hold by the governing board. This decision was made to allow for a more thorough assessment of any potential risks involved. They ultimately chose not to proceed with this. They held back. They didn't act. That plan never materialized. They considered the possibility that such actions might lead to complications later on, and so it was never carried out. Let me be absolutely clear. If such maneuvers had actually been implemented, the consequences would have been extremely severe. However, they were not. How did the Reichsbank in Berlin view the role played by the Swiss banks? They saw them as a crucial partner. a fact supported by an internal report penned in June of 1943. In this report, Walter Funk, who was then the Reich Minister of Economics and also the President of the Central Bank, declared, ever since the initial delivery of 20 tons of gold in 1940, the shipments sent by the Reichsbank to the Swiss National Bank's vaults saw a rapid increase each year, reaching their peak in 1943, when an impressive 120 tons of gold arrived from Berlin. In total, the SNB's vaults saw nearly 345 tons of gold added from Berlin during the duration of World War II. But why did Germany have such a desperate need for Swiss francs? Was the wealth plundered from occupied nations not sufficient? Why was Germany so insistent on trading with neutral countries, importing essential oil from Romania, iron from Sweden, and chromium from Turkey? The answer to these pressing questions can be found deep within a secluded valley in northern Portugal. Specifically, in Rio de Frades, situated within an old tungsten mine that was actively operated by the Third Reich throughout the war. Tungsten is a remarkable metal. Its primary characteristics include exceptional resistance to extremely high temperatures and corrosion. Following advancements made by the Soviet Union, Germany's primary sources for tungsten became Portugal and Spain. Without a reliable supply of tungsten, Germany would have been compelled to halt its manufacturing of weapons and ammunition. It's impossible to construct an aircraft engine without tungsten, a metal capable of withstanding temperatures as high as 6,000 degrees. When a dive bomber descends rapidly, its engine can reach temperatures of several thousand degrees. Tungsten ensures that the engine will not explode, and the same principle applies to engine oil. Without these small, yet critical components, your war machinery simply would not function. Literally speaking, and this is precisely where the Swiss National Bank played an extremely significant role. When you consider the contributions made by Swiss leaders to the German war effort, it's not necessarily about the sheer volume, but rather the crucial quality of their support. Under considerable pressure from the Allies, the neutral European nations that had been supplying Germany with essential raw materials refused to accept payment in stolen gold. The case of Portuguese tungsten highlights a sophisticated trading network that emerged with Switzerland's assistance, often referred to as triangular trading. So, what course of action did the Reichsbank take? Early in the war, they turned to Swiss banks to exchange gold for Swiss francs. The Reichsbank then utilized these Swiss francs to compensate their Portuguese suppliers. Subsequently, the Bank of Portugal presented these Swiss francs to the SNB, requesting their conversion back into gold. The gold wasn't physically transported to Lisbon from one day to the next. Instead, it was moved internally within the Swiss National Bank's vaults. The gold bars were simply transferred to the vault designated for the Portuguese treasury. Through this triangular trading system, the Swiss francs that originated from Bale eventually found their way back. But the gold that entered the Swiss vaults generally remained there. In the 20th century, the German government managed to leverage the assets of the central bank's post-occupation banks. The Allies' scrutiny of the Swiss National Bank specifically brought to light discussions among the central bank's governing board members, shedding light on the extent of their knowledge. Gottlieb Bachmann held the position of president of the bank committee at that time, and Paul Rossi served as vice president. With responsibility for overseeing gold transactions. The meeting minutes from August of 1943 record the following exchange. Two critical questions need to be addressed. Firstly, do we intend to accept this gold? And secondly, without conducting further examination, can we legitimately accept this gold, even if there are potential suspicions about its illicit acquisition. The national bankers had not yet received any information that would suggest the Germans had obtained stolen gold. The acquisition of monetary gold falls within the sovereign rights of a nation under international law. Therefore, this position suggests they failed to grasp the fundamental departure from normalcy that the Nazi regime represented. It was no longer feasible to conduct business with the central bankers appointed by Hitler in the same manner as with the central bankers of other democratic nations. I am neutral, therefore I must conduct business with Germany just as I do with the Allies. It was almost an unavoidable outcome. We cannot ethically refuse German gold if we are accepting gold from the Allies, given our neutral status. They didn't give it much further consideration. They proceeded with transactions, which is essentially what capitalism dictates. That is the core purpose of a business, and it's what defines a successful capitalist. It's considered their moral obligation. So, what actions does a business take under normal circumstances? It identifies opportunities as they arise, without scrutinizing them too deeply. When the Allied forces successfully landed on the beaches of Normandy in June of 1944, the conclusion of the war was virtually guaranteed. It was merely a matter of time and the specific terms of the Allied forces' victory. Disregarding caution entirely, the Swiss National Bank continued its business dealings with the Reichsbank. However, as early as 1942, the Allies had commenced tracking Switzerland's activities. They repeatedly urged the Swiss Confederation to cease all purchases of German gold. Switzerland intentionally delayed any action. It wasn't until March 8, 1945, mere weeks before Adolf Hitler took his own life, that Swiss authorities formally signed the Curry Mission Agreement with the Allies in Berlin, wherein Switzerland committed to halting all gold purchases originating from Germany. Yet, a month after this agreement was officially signed, a new gold purchase was actually executed. On April 13, 1945, 132 gold bars were transported from the Reichsbank in Constance to the Swiss vaults located in Berlin. It was widely understood that Switzerland, particularly its national bank and its government, would inevitably be held accountable for its actions. And yet, despite the political agreement that Switzerland had only signed a month prior, they proceeded to make one final purchase. This transaction served to reimburse a certain number of depositors who were concerned about potential losses. It's difficult to ascertain the precise reasoning. I don't know the reason. There truly isn't a clear answer. The Reichsbank could confidently rely on the Swiss National Bank right up until the final moments of the Nazi regime, even as American, British, and Soviet bombs rained down upon Berlin. Emil Pohl, upon his return from a visit to Switzerland, penned a letter to his superior, Walter Funk. Here are a few options, keeping the original meaning but aiming for a more engaging, natural TikTok/YouTube style. Option 1, direct and punchy Switzerland saying no more gold from Germany. Option 2, slightly more descriptive big news. Switzerland just stopped buying gold from Germany. Option 3, focus on the action Germany's gold exports to Switzerland. They're on hold. Option 4, intrigue guess what? Switzerland's halting gold shipments from Germany. Just a month after that deal was inked, boom, another big gold purchase went down. April 13, 1945, and guess what? Here are a few options for your TikTok/YouTube subtitle, keeping the original meaning and tone while being more engaging and slightly shorter. Option 1, focus on movement. From Constance, 132 gold bars made their way to Swiss vaults in Berlin. Option 2, slightly more dramatic, greater than 132 bars of gold. They left Constance's Reichsbank, heading for Swiss vaults in Berlin. Option 3, direct and punchy, greater than 132 gold bars. They shipped out of Constance's Reichsbank for Swiss vaults in Berlin. Option 4, emphasizing the destination, off they went. 132 gold bars departed the Constance Reichsbank, bound for Swiss vaults in Berlin. Here are a few options for rewriting the caption, keeping the original meaning using natural US English and aiming for a hook. Option 1, slightly more direct, everyone was aware that Switzerland, specifically their national bank overseen by the government. Option 2, focus on knowledge, it was common knowledge that Switzerland, and more precisely its government-run national bank. Option 3, more conversational. Pretty much everyone realized that Switzerland, especially their national bank under government control, they really should face consequences. But even with that political deal Switzerland struck, just a month before this, they made one final buy. Here's a rewritten version of your caption for TikTok/YouTube. Loads of people were totally freaked out about losing money. Honestly, it's a total mystery why. No clear reason found. The Reichsbank had a reliable backup in the Swiss National Bank, right up until the Nazi regime's final moments. Bombs from American, British, and Soviet forces were raining down on Berlin. Here's a rewrite of your caption for TikTok/YouTube, keeping the original meaning while aiming for a more engaging and natural US English style. Emil Poole, back from his time in Switzerland, dropped a note to his boss, Walter Funk. I have to say, the Swiss people were incredibly courteous to me. Just yesterday, for instance, they hosted a special dinner in my honor. Of course, our adversaries quickly got wind of this. Switzerland itself wasn't destroyed. If that ended up being a good outcome, so be it. The nation remained intact. When you look at the footage from countries like France, Germany, and Italy at the war's close, it's quite clear that Switzerland was remarkably lucky to emerge from it all unharmed. We still get to enjoy sporting events. Our young people are healthy and active. Our farms and gardens weren't devastated. Our livestock are safe. Our communities deserve a period of peace. Well-meaning, honorable individuals would often recall an old joke by Bertolt Brecht from back then. I believe it went something like, Hitler has no real reason to attack Switzerland. Why would you attack your own vault? Invading Switzerland wasn't appealing to the Nazi regime for multiple reasons. Not only is fighting in the Alps a truly challenging military endeavor, but Switzerland also served as a very valuable neutral broker for the Nazi regime. It was like an untouched sanctuary right in the middle of the Nazi empire, harmless, yet undeniably useful. Throughout the war, Swiss bankers handled close to 500 tons of Nazi gold. In today's money, that amount is equivalent to about 60 billion euros. So, what position would Switzerland hold with the victorious nations right after the war concluded? In 1946, the Allies formally extended an invitation to a Swiss delegation, asking them to come to Washington to answer for Switzerland's questionable actions during the war. 68 days of intense negotiations followed, leading to a surprising result. Switzerland actually managed to avoid serious repercussions. What was absolutely critical from Switzerland's perspective was that the Swiss delegation secured a complete and final resolution. It's crucial to recall that at this exact moment, the Dutch had not yet even begun their efforts to reclaim their gold. Only after the negotiations concluded did the Netherlands state, "Hey, a significant portion of Dutch gold reserves was also pilfered. We want this case reopened," but the Swiss responded legally, "The case is closed." Therefore, from the Swiss point of view, the agreement was clearly seen as beneficial. Publicly, they would express, "This is terrible. These Americans have us in a chokehold. They're trying to strangle us." However, privately, they acknowledged that the deal had been exceptionally advantageous for Switzerland, which had essentially gotten off with a very light penalty. If there was one place where the satisfaction of the Swiss delegation was clearly visible, it was in a report sent from the Swiss embassy in Washington to their minister. The fact that a small nation with only 4 million people could succeed against 3 major world powers, forcing them to significantly reduce their demands, is nothing short of a diplomatic marvel, in my opinion. There was a fine, yes, but Switzerland had negotiated skillfully. Nevertheless, a penalty was still imposed. I truly believe our diplomats were exceptionally skilled. Before long, the Iron Curtain descended across the middle of Europe, and Zurich's financial hub soon re-established itself as a vital partner for Western investors. This presented Switzerland, or more accurately, Swiss bankers, with another remarkable chance to evade the consequences they so greatly deserved. Like many European countries, post-war Switzerland crafted a triumphant, legendary narrative for itself. This story portrayed heroic defiance against the Nazi regime, a safe haven for those fleeing, and an unblemished record of neutrality. For many years, Switzerland was able to keep its secrets hidden. 50 years after that miracle in Washington, it was almost by chance that the true story of Nazi gold laundered by the Swiss National Bank came to light in the mid-1990s during a heated political debate between the United States and Switzerland, sparked by the controversy over dormant accounts. These were accounts opened in Swiss banks and insurance firms by individuals hoping to escape the Nazis, or who were themselves victims of Nazi atrocities. Many of these individuals did not survive, leaving those assets locked in bank and insurance accounts. The banks decided to present a united front. They agreed that to claim dormant accounts, legitimate heirs and beneficiaries would be required to present the official death certificate of the deceased account holder, along with documents verifying their status as designated beneficiaries. For anyone who perished in a place like Dachau or any other extermination camp, the Nazis never issued an official death certificate. To demand a death certificate for someone who was murdered in an extermination camp shows a significant lack of empathy and basic reasoning. In 1996, the World Jewish Congress took up this issue, urging the few remaining survivors and descendants of Holocaust victims to come forward, labeling it one of the most significant financial scandals in history. The matter gained political traction when New York Senator Alfonso D'Amato, who chaired the Senate Banking Committee, became involved, and when the Clinton administration declassified American records from World War II. This isn't about seeking revenge. It's about achieving justice. Greg Rickman, who served as Senator D'Amato's chief aide, conducted historical research for the senator. He faced considerable hostility from the Swiss. He vividly remembers the profound disdain that Swiss bankers and officials displayed. Their attitude was that no one survived. There couldn't have been that much money there anyway. And as we later discovered, their belief was that any money present was essentially war spoils. This is ours. No one returned to claim it. So why shouldn't we keep it? A careless remark by the head of Switzerland's largest bank, UBS, was a clear indicator of the Swiss leadership's mindset. 10.5 million. That's 10.5 million Swiss francs today. That's the interest on interest. I think it's fair to say we're only talking about peanuts. He used the term peanuts. This statement went viral within moments. It deeply angered Jewish groups, who felt insulted by the bank chairman's words. Faced with a strong campaign from the United States, Swiss authorities and bankers made a series of missteps. Even their attempts to appear helpful backfired. These are listings from the New York Times showing the names of accounts they discovered after the Swiss banks published them. Under pressure from the United States, the Swiss Banking Association invested $5 million in newspaper advertisements across 28 countries to publicize a list of dormant account holders. This news was astonishing, but for some completely unexpected reasons. The list contained 1,862 names, but the Swiss authorities had neglected to screen it before releasing it. As a result, a significant number of Nazis and Nazi sympathizers, including Kaltenbrunner, Tucke, and Bauer, appeared on that list. Publishing a list of dormant account holders would lead to another serious consequence for the Swiss. Madeleine Kunin, former governor of Vermont, found herself at the center of this new development. I was born in Zurich, Switzerland, and we left the country in 1940 due to World War II, when I was 6.5 years old. Later, when I was appointed ambassador to Switzerland by Bill Clinton, felt like my life had come full circle. One morning, I was in my office, reading the newspaper and scanning the list. My mother's name was there. Her first initial was A. I was utterly shocked. If we talk about things the Swiss did incorrectly, I wouldn't say they did this wrong. But it certainly worked against them, and they couldn't have possibly imagined that the ambassador from the very country accusing them of wrongdoing would herself find her name on the list. Well, I shared it with my brother, and it came out to about $100 each. You see, the Swiss bank, instead of paying interest and letting you earn money, they actually charged fees for holding the account. I suspect the amount was never very large, but it was probably significant for them at that time. It's an unusual way to conduct banking, but it seems to work for the Swiss. To compel Swiss bankers and institutions to finally take action on unclaimed assets, it's an unusual banking method. But hey, it gets the job done for the Swiss. We're pushing Swiss bankers and institutions to finally do something about those forgotten assets. The United States began looking through old records for any information that could be damaging. They were piecing together forgotten parts of Switzerland's collective past, things that hadn't been remembered for 50 years. The topic of the Swiss National Bank acquiring Nazi gold couldn't be avoided any longer. We have documents that prove the Swiss were directly and actively involved in moving gold for the Nazis. These records show that Switzerland's claim of staying neutral during World War II was simply not true. As one of these documents pointed out, about 2/3 of all the gold Germany sent out of the country during the war ended up at the Swiss National Bank. Looking at these documents, the only thing you can understand is that they helped prolong the war. It was their main market, and they kept the war machine going by providing them with money. If they hadn't had a place to conduct their financial dealings, they wouldn't have been able to pay for the war. Switzerland kept the war going longer. This idea is still a subject of much discussion today. We can also imagine that if Switzerland had faced a boycott during difficult times, it might have disrupted certain industries, especially in manufacturing. But whether such a disruption would have actually happened during the war is purely speculative. Honestly, I have no idea. How could anyone possibly know? It's tough to talk about what might have happened in history, right? If it had been 6 months or 1 month, or even just 1 day less, how many lives would have been saved worldwide across all of Europe because they had continued funding? Millions more likely perished due to the deliberate actions of those who took and laundered stolen gold in Switzerland, profiting from ill-gotten gains. On May 7, 1997, the accusations made by the Clinton administration sent massive shockwaves globally. The Swiss people were stunned, confused, and angered. They no longer knew what narrative to accept. Eventually, Swiss officials felt compelled to start offering more solid explanations. They could no longer dismiss it as ancient history. In what was essentially a crisis, the government appointed historians to begin providing some answers, hoping this would help calm the situation. After being appointed as the chairman of the important International Commission of Experts, tasked with re-examining Switzerland's history, the Zurich-based scholar has captured attention, and expectations are very high. His role is to help the Swiss reconcile with their recent past. He has also become a significant figure in the political arena. The authorities established the commission and made the crucial decision to equip the historians with the necessary resources to do their job properly. And by resources, I mean the Swiss Federal Council decided to grant historians access to the archives of private companies, including Swiss banks, for a period of 5 years. This effectively suspended banking secrecy for that duration. This started to provide some answers, but those answers tended to confirm there was much more to uncover. There were also several aspects that drew criticism. A series of widespread revelations came to light concerning the activities of private companies and banks during World War II, the diminished role of Swiss forces against the Nazis, and refugee policies previously considered beyond reproach. However, the Swiss National Bank's handling of Nazi gold revealed one of the most disturbing truths of all. Some of the gold that entered the Swiss National Bank, perhaps as many as 6 bars, or as few as 3 according to Berge, was dental gold extracted from victims at concentration camps in southern Poland, specifically in Auschwitz and Lublin. This gold was melted down at the Reichsbank in Berlin and then sent to the Swiss National Bank. We cannot deny the possibility, and indeed the fact, that gold taken from Jews who perished in concentration camps, even if it was a small amount, did indeed reach Switzerland and ultimately found its way into the vaults of the Swiss National Bank. Alongside the Berge Commission, the Swiss Parliament passed a law prohibiting the destruction of any archives, public or private, related to World War II. Christoph Melle, then a young man working as a night watchman at the Union Bank of Switzerland, the powerful UBS, sparked new controversy. The hypocrisy of Swiss officials became evident once again. This security employee turned whistleblower discovered accounting records in a room designated for document shredding. He found binders and papers dating from the 1930s and 1940s that detailed real estate holdings in Berlin. I knew those documents shouldn't be shredded. They needed to be presented to the expert commission. After a press conference in Zurich, I returned home to find television cameras waiting at my door, and the postman had delivered my termination letter. Then, the phone began ringing in my living room. It was a call from Washington, D.C., from the U.S. Senate Banking Committee. Mr. D'Amato invited me to the United States to discuss what I had witnessed. Senator John Kerry ardently declared Christoph Melle a hero, not a criminal, yet a judicial investigation was opened against him for violating banking secrecy. The UBS employee who ordered the documents shredded faced no charges. After he revealed those documents, he was accused of violating bank secrecy by UBS and essentially theft. It's ironic because those documents were intended for shredding, which would have had the same outcome. Yet, at the time and even now, people say, Melle is with the Jews. Melle has been bought by the Jews. Melle is being paid by the Jews. I can only imagine the persecution the Jewish people must have endured back then. The U.S. Congress passed the bill, and President Bill Clinton signed it into law. And I became the first Swiss citizen to be granted political asylum in America. Christoph Melle became an outcast in his own country, but a hero in the United States. It was like a chess match. The United States was determined to pressure Switzerland by targeting its most vulnerable areas. This included the country's leading industries and its banks. Suddenly, the threat of a boycott seriously risked damaging their reputation. And a bank absolutely needs a good reputation for people to trust it with their money and investments. So, I think that was the issue that grabbed everyone's attention. It did indeed come to an end through an agreement, one where Swiss banks certainly paid more than they were obligated to, I would say. But I don't feel sorry for them. They made their fair share of mistakes. It served as a valuable lesson, as the saying goes. The banks paid a significant price, much more than they likely would have if things had resolved naturally. I am incredibly pleased and gratified to announce that we have reached a historic agreement with the Swiss banks that will provide both moral and material justice to those who have suffered for so long. The agreement involves a settlement of $1.25 billion. When you consider the potential cumulative interest over the past 50 years, it's a surprisingly small amount. But it was a way for the Swiss bankers to get away with it, very likely a second time. a remarkably advantageous deal for them. After a period of intense scrutiny of its past, and following 3 years of revelations and criticism, the Swiss Commission of Experts, led by Professor Berge, finally released its 11,000-page report. This report offered a comprehensive examination of Switzerland's actions during World War II. The majority of Switzerland had reached a breaking point. Swiss economist Jean-Christophe Lambelet is a strong supporter of the country's historical narrative. We established the movement, a task force for the true history of Switzerland, to push back against what we saw as misguided and often harmful attacks. These have shaped the current political climate and have tarnished Switzerland's image. What can you do when you're situated next to a country with 80 million people? According to the 1940 census, Germany already had a population of 80 million. We sparked a movement, a special team dedicated to uncovering Switzerland's actual past. Pushing back hard against those misguided and even nasty attacks. Here are a few options for rewriting the subtitle, keeping the original meaning while making it more engaging and natural for TikTok/YouTube, with a slight reduction in length. Option 1, focus on impact. Shaping our current political world. Option 2, more descriptive. Leading us to the political scene we see now. Option 3, action-oriented. That brought us to this political moment. Option 4, slightly more formal but still accessible, and created today's political climate. And it's really damaged Switzerland's reputation. What's your move when you're neighbors with an 80 million person country? Did you know back in 1940, Germany's population hit a massive 80 million. Switzerland had a population of just 4 million people. They lacked essential raw materials and could only produce half the food they needed. You have to do what's necessary. All the incoming calls we've received so far have been in the same direction. Few people are very critical of the Commission's work. Some very strong words have been spoken. The Belgian Commission faced criticism for not considering the historical context. The Belgian report doesn't present the complete picture. It has also been suggested that other countries acted far worse than Switzerland, so Switzerland shouldn't bear all the blame. You see, there's a well-off majority in Switzerland, about 2/3 of the population, who agree with this philosophy and these perspectives. Many people felt like their memories were being taken away, their pride, and the spirit of resistance that Switzerland had. The Swiss were quite proud that Hitler supposedly referred to Switzerland as the little hedgehog. That was Switzerland's role. Like a tiny creature, not very strong, but able to keep a predator away with its spines. After many years of careful research in the archives, and after months of difficult times, arguments, and national crisis, the matter was once again put to rest, leaving hardly any sign of it in Switzerland today. How often do we see headlines about another Swiss bank being brought before the US government and fined for wrongdoing, or for dealing with arms dealers or making illegal money transfers? And I often wonder if they've truly learned anything. History helps us ask the important questions. Questions about ethics and politics, and about the rules for the economy, both for the state and for society. If profit is the only goal, it can lead to some choices we regret. Switzerland is a truly captivating country, incredibly complex, but it needs to be freed from its powerful banking elite. This will happen because a widespread shift in awareness within Switzerland is imminent.